Hey, what's going on, Guardians? My name is The Black Link, and we are here to cover this week's issue of the Bungie Weekly blog, This Week at Bungie. This time around, we got a lot of news about Trials of Osiris, some changes we'll be seeing moving forward, and some things Bungie has learned in recent weeks, including some very big news about the flawless matchmaking pool. Well, big news in that it's gonna be replaced. And if that sounds like an exciting change, wait until we get into some of the numbers here. Let's go ahead and dive right on in. Now, in a section titled Trials Matchmaking Changes, we got a lot of information about Trials of Osiris, the Freelance playlist, and even more over the last few weeks. Here's what Bungie had to say. They start things out by talking a bit about the Freelance playlist, which was live last week. So, this past week, we opened the Freelance queue so that solo players would consistently play against other groups of solos. How'd that feel? Well, they had over 1 million games played in each playlist this weekend, with slightly more games played in the base Trials of Osiris playlist. Average hours played for the lower skill players is also up quite a bit over the past few weeks, while the average to top end has almost the same hours played. Interestingly, players who played in a fire team some of the time and solo some of the time played almost 3 times as long this weekend as players who either played exclusively solo or in a fire team. Kind of an interesting statistic there. But then we get directly into the player numbers. We had 244,000 Freelance exclusive players, 120,000 fire team exclusive players, and 220,000 played in both solo and in a fire team. 25.5% of players went flawless, lower than any revamp week, likely a fallout of the matches being fairer. Well, I suppose that's one way to interpret that data. They go on to state, if it doesn't drop below 20% for a weekend, the lighthouse should still feel attainable. Average matchmaking times were consistently around 50 seconds for full fire teams and solos, and regularly were about 100 seconds for duos. The Sunday Flawless pool adds about 10 seconds to flawless player matchmaking, and we are seeing some worrying spikes in matchmaking times for some of the smaller subpools post-flawless pool split. The overall blowout rate, games of course that ended with a score of 5-0 or 5-1 sometimes, was almost as low as our best post-revamp week when the flawless pool went active Friday afternoon at 27.8%. This was powered by the significant number of fire team versus fire team matches and solos versus solo matches, both of which had a 25% blowout rate. I suppose that's a good thing. You're having less people going in and just being completely shut down. Then they gave us a list of percentages of games that were actually blowouts, separated between the Freelance and the base playlist, but they followed that up by saying, one thing we aren't happy with is the team balance, and we've noticed how the solo playlist isn't doing a great job balancing 2 teams when there aren't any fire team mismatches. For Trials, it's currently just picking teams randomly. We are going to be looking very carefully at how teams are selected over the next few weeks, and hopefully have a better balance the next time Freelance Trials rolls around. This is one of the downsides of not using skill-based matchmaking in Trials. In situations where skill would be helpful, to balance 2 teams of solo players, it isn't even a data point the system can look at. Speaking of which, then we get to hear about some future changes to the Freelance playlist. But on that notion right there, Bungie lamenting that there's, of course, no pure skill-based algorithm available in Trials to kind of match up those solo players. I mean, maybe I'm just an agent of chaos, but I'm sitting here thinking, well, is that really such a bad thing that you're kind of randomly matching people in the Freelance playlist together? I thought that was the entire point of the Freelance playlist. You could just kind of match up with whomever and have a chance at winning a game. Maybe I'm looking too deeply into it. Let's see what Bungie has to say about Freelance futures. They say they like the overall outcome and the vibe of the Freelance queue, and both playlists seem to have a viable amount of players. They are looking at running Freelance occasionally for the remainder of Season 15, but are still trying to determine what feels right. Long term, they are exploring some single playlist solutions, preferential matching of full fire teams against other full fire teams, duo plus solo against another duo plus solo, but they don't have a specific release target for this yet, but do want to note that it will not be prior to Season 16, so we're not going to be seeing it, basically until the Witch Queen goes live. Beyond that, we've got some flawless pool changes as well. The flawless pool, which they've been enabling on Sunday at reset time, has had some positive benefits according to Bungie. It raises overall match quality, including blowout rates and all that kind of stuff, significantly, and it raises the overall win rate of solo players. However, it does have some drastic downsides. For players who struggle and manage to just barely go flawless, it is a steep cliff to then only play against other players who have already gone flawless that week. It also incentivizes behavior that is at odds with the mode and reward systems, like resetting a flawless 6-win ticket to keep getting easier matches but worse rewards. It also creates social friction where players need to decide between playing with friends or playing for rewards. Lastly, the timing, 10 a.m. Pacific on Sundays, is a little awkward if you live anywhere but the Americas. So, starting tomorrow, we're rolling out a new system and leaning into weekly performance metrics. Whenever you match in trials, in addition to trying to match with people with the same number of card wins, you will also attempt to match with people who have roughly the same number of overall wins for the weekend. If you can't find anyone to match against, it will eventually expand out to find a less similar match. For the PvP gods who go flawless 10 times a weekend, they will end up matching with other players who have, for example, 70 plus wins on their cards, no matter how they got them. For the average team who gets a lucky flawless in on Friday or Saturday on their first card, well, they will be matching against other players with around 7 wins, no matter how they got them. We are hoping this will give us many of the benefits of the flawless pool system, somewhat fairer matches according to Bungie again, without the significant downsides. I'm gonna press X to doubt on that one. Anyways, moving on, specifically there should be no major inflection point where everything is smooth prior to a win, and then everything is overly challenging after. While this allows us to remove the flawless pool, it does have a potential downside: longer matchmaking times. We think there's a reasonable trade-off here between match quality and matchmaking time. Average trials matchmaking times currently sit at around 50 seconds. Over the next few weekends, we are going to be looking at how much matchmaking time goes up and how it affects match quality. And then they give us a look at some of the outcomes from the previous non-labs weeks. But ultimately, that's pretty much it for the biggest changes coming to Trials of Osiris. Bungie's doing a lot of work here in attempting to replace the flawless matchmaking pool with kind of sort of a pseudo version of skill-based matchmaking and a flawless matchmaking pool by matching people up all throughout the weekend with other teams who have a similar number of wins. I'm not gonna lie, this sounds a bit like a mess to me. We already have an issue with Bungie kind of separating the matchmaking pools and, quarantining part of the player population, and that doesn't help with the overall life of the game mode. I'm gonna say what I've been saying for the past couple of weeks. Look, I liked the Freelance playlist. I thought it was an interesting idea. We talked a lot about that on the podcast. Bungie, you had the correct recipe on week 1. Yeah, I don't think you need to go reinventing the wheel constantly with this. But hey, we're going to give it a shot. We'll jump into Trials this weekend and see if this makes for a better or more frustrating experience. And then, of course, we'll be reporting back to you with exactly how we feel about it. But alright, Guardians, that's pretty much it for the biggest bits of news contained in this week's issue of the Bungie Weekly Blog, This Week at Bungie. How do you feel about the incoming Trials changes? Did you enjoy the Freelance playlist? Be sure to let us know down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to drop a like, make sure you subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest stuff we put out. Well, that's it for this one. As always, I am the Black Link. You Guardians stay frosty. Oh, and by the way, Iron Banner is going to be live next week.